Hello, my name is Andre. Welcome back. Very excited to see you guys again. I'm a former chef, retired for 2 years, been working in the street for 10 years. That's my background story. Figured might as well give myself a little bit of credibility. Worked in New York City fine dining for that amount of time. Worked for Jean-Georges, Tom Colicchio, Alfred Portale. Started one of our own small restaurants where I was a chef de cuisine. We made it into the Michelin Guide, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm retired, I have a kid, and that's my backstory. So that's why you should listen to me, Super important, super credible, right? Giving myself a little bit of street cred here so that you guys can enjoy the video. Okay, what's the video gonna be about? So this video is gonna be about gelato, in particular ice cream shops. Not necessarily gelato, there's just slight differences in fat content and technique of how to make the two different delicious frozen and sweet desserts. So besides the slight difference, why are ice cream shops, why is gelato such a good restaurant business model? Very interested in this because my wife and I have been ideating on a couple of concepts that we think would be profoundly successful, where we can avoid the pitfalls of standard restaurants that have incredibly high J curves, meaning the amount of money and investment to set up the place, and then the amount of money and fixed and variable costs required to operate before you make a profit, right? There's a huge amount of costs to cover until you get above that cost threshold and start making that profit. So why is gelato such an outstanding concept, and gelato specifically as opposed to ice cream? First of all, I like gelato because it immediately ties it to Italian cuisine, Italian culture, that if for the broader audience makes it a bit more unique and a bit more streamlined. Whereas if it's just ice cream, then you get into all sorts of weird pseudo-American pitfalls of why not put Oreo cookies in ice cream, or infinite sprinkles, and then it just gets gross, and it gives me a very confectionery kind of Disney World, commodity, Chuck E. Cheese kind of vibe. Whereas gelato, it's it's elegant, it's European, it's Italian. There's a heritage to it, there's a history, unlike this American shit. And so, position yourself in the gelato market with the gelato brand or style of cuisine immediately gives it a slightly more luxurious allure, whereas it's not just commodity ice cream, This is just marketing stuff. I'm not saying that having a heritage is or is not important. If you're an American out there and you don't want to make gelato and you're running an ice cream shop that's highly successful, you're probably pointing the finger at me, rolling your eyes and saying, that's all irrelevant. But the basic point is, okay, what makes this business plan so good? First of all, the startup cost. If you really think about it, you don't need a large space to serve ice cream out of or gelato. You could literally be like a hot dog stand in the middle of Times Square, and instead of steaming wiener dogs, you're serving frozen ice cream because you have a freezer there, and it's great. So you basically need an ice cream machine. That's the only thing you need. And if you buy, depending on the size, we're talking about small, medium, large. Large is probably 80, I don't know, 80 quarts. Medium is 40 to 50 quarts, and then small is 10 to 20 quarts, right? And so, another denomination is also liters, but I'm using it by volume, unfortunately. So the idea is even if you buy a medium-sized machine, you're talking maximum $22,000 brand new. If you get it used, you could probably go smaller than that. The idea isn't so much what the cost of the gelato machine. The concept is that it's a single piece of equipment that you need to really start making gelatos. And then you need a freezer to store your batches in, right? It could be a reach-in freezer. You don't even need a walk-in or a walk-in freezer. It's literally a reach-in, a giant fridge. You open the door, you put all your gelatos in there, in their third pans, you wrap them tight, beautiful. You respin before service. And then the other thing that you need is a giant display freezer, right? Small counter, we have your POS system and an iPad, right? Or what all the cool kids are using these days. And then you have your gelato display. So we're talking about three large pieces of equipment. We're not talking about ventilation for a kitchen. We're not talking about ranges and stovetops and deep fryers and convection ovens and large walk-ins, right? Large kitchens. You need an entire hood system, right? You need an Ansel system. The costs just blow up to set up a kitchen that serves, between 25 to 50 seats. The costs are immense, and that's assuming you get a turnkey deal where you turn the key for the property that you're buying or renting, and you walk in and your kitchen is even remotely functional, right? And you can even use the equipment. But the idea is that the startup cost is just so much lower because you need those three primary pieces of equipment: the machine that makes the the machine that makes the gelato, the freezer in which you store it, and then the freezer in which you display it, or chilled display. And then you just need a POS system, maybe an espresso machine if you like, and that's really it. I mean, on the back end, kitchen supplies are like, okay, spatulas. You probably need a fructometer, if I'm saying that correctly, which is the device that measures the sugar. My wife is the pastry chef, not me, so I'm just talking on my ass here. But I'm correct in the broad scheme of things. Maybe in the hyper minutia, my wife will correct me about, like the fat content that you're supposed to use, whether you use milk or dairy predominantly, and make a gelato, how you make purees. Getting on a tangent here. She's the expert, I'm not. I'm the big idea guy. She's the meticulous, detailed, nuanced person. So, three big pieces of equipment, a couple spatulas maybe like a stove top that you can plug in to make your purees. But again, those are all small, nitty-gritty things, and you don't need a lot of them. So, talking about those startup costs. And then, think about it this way. You're gonna say, Andre, but isn't gelato like a volume business? It's exactly it. It is a volume business, but it's not a volume business where you need customers to sit. Therefore, you don't need to commit money and resources to a larger space. You could literally just have a corner store or even a small kiosk window where a person comes up, takes their order, and then they wait, and then you hand them their ice cream and they go on their merry way. And if you're lucky enough where you can have enough space where customers can walk in, take their order, and then walk out, and then sit outside, that's amazing. But again, the space required to service the ice cream is not the same space that's required to serve a sit-down restaurant or a sit-down bistro or a diner, because that's the beauty of it is your service is a grab-and-go service. If you have the ability for a couple of tables for customers to sit, that's great, but that adds on to rent. If you don't have that, and let's say you have outdoor seating, that's great too. So, again, startup costs, very low, small amount of equipment needed, just three key pieces. The size of the property doesn't need to be large. It can be very small. And the concept of the service is grab and go. It's not sit down and eat. So because it's also grab and go, you don't need to put as much effort and thought into how you're going to set up your kitchen, how are you going to conduct service. What are the touch points from the beginning of in which the customer enters your property up until they receive their check and they're getting up to leave, right? What are all those touch points? You don't need to think about any of that. It's you see the billboard, you come in, you look at the menu, you select the flavor, you ask for a little taste, you order it, you pay for it, you get it, you walk out. And so this way you can have a chain of people coming in, and that's your service. It's just you're open throughout the day, people coming in, people coming out, right? So it's volume. One of the pitfalls of volume, some say, is that it's a low margin business. You're really required to service so many people and your margins get smaller and smaller and smaller. I think that really applies to like fast food chain restaurants, which is why the quality of their food is so low, is because they do everything in their power to control the chain of production. Like McDonald's French fries, for example, they own from the moment, they even have a patent on the genetics behind the French fry that they use for McDonald's. The point is they have that entire infrastructure built out to drive down the cost of the potato French fry so that when they do sell you that French fry, they're actually making a slightly higher margin. They eke it out not really by raising prices, but by lowering the quality of the built-in ingredients. This is what I think, okay? I swear to God, if there's a McDonald's lawyer out there who's gonna give me a phone call and slap a lawsuit on me, I'm a nobody, guys. I'm just giving you my opinion. So, we're talking about volume, yes. Let's talk about coffee business. So, the issue that I have with coffee shops personally is that I believe that coffee shops are high margin per cup, but you need to sell so much coffee at such a low check average. That's the issue. It's not that coffee is or is not, it's not that coffee is low margin. Coffee, right? It's water and coffee, toasted coffee beans, ground up and pushed through an espresso machine to get your little cappuccino, right? That's high margin, but the issue is the check average, the revenue per person is so low that you have to sell so many coffees to cover existing costs. With ice cream and gelato in particular, you have the exact same high margin range, right? You have very high margins, like the actual cost of the materials versus the price you're selling it for. That gap is what you get to keep as a business off the revenue, right? The difference is the check average is so much higher. I live across the street from a gelato place, and they're charging $8 for 2 scoops and a paper cup. And it's the best gelato I've ever had, by the way. But the point is it's $8, not $4.50. I know you guys are like, wait, that much money, how can that make a huge difference? It does. If a coffee shop needs to sell 80 cups of coffee per day, or like let's say 100 cups of coffee per day to break even because they deduce their costs. They're like, what are our costs per month that are fixed? What are our variable costs on average? Okay, how much do we have to sell per day to break even, to pay the bills? And then how much do we have to sell after to start making profit? You have to, as a business owner, know what your costs are per day. And so think about it. Let's say I have to sell 100 coffees. If I sell 100 gelatos, I'm making 2 times more because I can charge 2 times more. No one's paying $8 for a cup of coffee. I don't care how high the inflation gets. They have to be putting fucking caviar or some, fresh Madagascar vanilla in there or some other bullshit. Maybe Starbucks does it, right? Because the coffees are so large, maybe they supersize it, right? They have the grande size. Not too familiar, not an avid Starbucks drinker. I prefer my hipster, ironic, revolutionary coffee down the street because as weird as those people are, they make outstanding coffee. Anyways, point being, high margin business, but highly dependent on volume because the price per unit that you sell is so low. Gelato, same concept, but price per unit is double. And you can upcharge. What if you put little garnishes on it? Not a fan of those because I think it's tacky and corny. I prefer to frame it a luxury so that I could sell, instead of doing the upsell, I could just sell more per cup or per scoop, You can put in a cone, right? You can do an additional scoop. So the idea is also, when you go to get coffee, the average person gets coffee by themselves. They're on their way to work. They're on their way to an event. They're on their way to do something else. And then the ones that don't work in coffee shops, never understood those people. But whenever they do that, maybe they'll have several coffees. They're the actual reoccurring business. And therefore, coffee shops are incentivized to have larger spaces, pay more per rent. So they got people sitting on computers who might buy 2 or 3 more cups than the average person. Interesting. And I'm not as expert in the coffee concept / business model as the true hardcore coffee owners who could really dive into that concept more. But again, the idea of like having to grow your space to accommodate people who want to sit and enjoy the ambiance, and they're your recurring revenue because then they will be buying more and more coffee, right? You can do more. One person is worth multiple cups of coffee per day instead of just that one regular person like me who's getting coffee on the way. With ice cream, almost always, I don't see people getting ice cream by themselves. Okay, you could say like, oh, when I buy coffee, I get it with my wife or my friend or my girlfriend or my boyfriend, right? We're on our way together, we're carpooling or whatever the hell. So maybe you'll get 2 cups from that couple. If they're buying from you every day, you're super lucky, very expensive, or maybe a couple times a week. But I know that with ice cream in particular, gelato in particular, I almost never see a single solo dude who's like, hey, I'm just gonna munch an ice cream by myself. It's almost always multiple people, families, friends, going together in large numbers. It's almost like they're out and about. The equivalent of going to a sit-down place, but no, they come to your ice cream shop to get the gelato, right? So boom, you're getting multiple sales transactions right there. And so I was speaking with my wife and we're running down a couple of costs, and I'm not gonna share my metrics yet because that would require a little bit more work instead of me just turning on the camera and doing this. Once that happens, we can do a full breakdown of the cost. But we looked at like average, like how many, if our most popular unit that we're gonna sell is gonna be 2 scoops in a cup, right? And we're gonna sell it for this price, how many do we need to sell per day to break even on cost? And we discovered that it's between 62 and 72 if our cost assumptions are correct. So that sounds like a lot, right? With coffee, it's the same thing. We have to hit that volume. But again, if we were doing coffee exclusively, we would be double that amount, right? We would be at like 140 cups of coffee. But no, because the gelato, we can charge twice as much as a cup of coffee per unit. We have to sell less. And that's the thing that I love about it is the final thing, staff and labor. I need one person who's an expert, who knows what they're doing. Genuinely, one person. Now, one person is some pastry chef, somebody that's trained in confectionery, someone that's trained in ice cream gelato making. I mean, hell, if you have a good machine and you're a good learner, you can even learn it from YouTube. I'm not trying to diminish the skill set. What I'm saying is one person is responsible for manufacturing all of the goods sold for that day. One person. We're not talking about training a general manager, training servers, training bartenders, training busboys, training prep cooks, line cooks, sous chefs, chefs, executive chefs, dishwashers. Oh my God. a sommelier. Imagine. And then you have the full dichotomy between back and front of the house where they're fighting, disagreeing, living different lifestyles. One makes more money for way less work, and the other one makes way less money for way more work. I'm biased. I work in the kitchen, so yeah. Gelato, ice cream stand. You avoid all that, guys. It's a summer job on the boardwalk. You pay college students minimum wage to. Would you like a sample? Here's a scoop. You teach them to scoop. And as long as they smile, say hello, goodbye, what flavor is this? And they can run a register, that's all you need to do to train them. No more like stupid like mid-shift meetings. Hey, taste the food. Hey, these are all the touch points. These are the recipes you have to know. The fucking like the allergies, like all the different substitutions. None of that. None of that. Hey, college student, you want a summer job? Yeah. Do you want to get paid minimum wage? Yeah. How many hours can you work? Or, I don't know, per week? 25. I want to be part-time. No problem. You hire a bunch of those. They're everywhere. Give kids an opportunity to go and work in the business, right? Give them an opportunity. Perfect. Guess what? Staff is cheap. Training is cheap. Not diminishing the training. We are going to train staff. We are going to have them perform at a certain standard. What I'm saying is that standard is significantly lower, not because we're bad people or because we don't care. I'm just saying that the other thing has way more qualifications and requires way more things for it to operate well and to make the customer happy versus this one. We all know it, it's common sense. I'm not gonna stress this enough. So, equipment needs, 3 things, right? Property, very small. What's the other one? High margin item with a high check average. One qualified person to make all the shit for the store to sell. Very cheap labor that doesn't need a lot of training. Those are the 5 reasons that gelato ice cream shops are amazing. And you can make them seasonal too. That's the other thing. That's the other thing, you can make them seasonal. I remember this wonderful store called Rosati's in Ohio. Let me see, where the hell do my grandparents live in Sagamore Hills, so it's about like 2-mile drive away from them. Spot called Rosati's, it's only open in the summers, 3 months a year, and that's it. And they have people at the door every day. Rent is cheap. You just have a parking lot and little stand. That's it. Simple, easy to do, easy to start. Really good. The next part that I want to tell you that every single brick and mortar thing should have has to do a little bit with content creation and marketing, and I'll save that for another video. Till next time, thank you so much for listening to me. I hope that my video quality is getting better. I hope that I'm looking more at the camera, making more eye contact with you, the viewer, and not looking away because I'm thinking or spewing or romanticizing or waffling, right? I hope I'm getting better at this. And speaking off the dome, only took a few notes, got writer's block, decided to not continue writing, decided to just say it because I have the general gist in my head. Thank you for listening. Have a good one.